Welcome to Missing Briefs. I'm Dominic, the founder and the owner of Elevate Business Coaching, a Boston-based business coaching and consulting firm that specializes in teaching law firms, their owners, their lawyers, how to build, manage, and grow successful practices.
And I'm Bob Furlong. I'm a certified exit planner. I help managing partners figure out their own personal finance, but also come up with strategies for them to attract and retain better associates so they can have a clear path to retirement for themselves.
So let's kick things off. So Missing Briefs, what's it all about? Well, it's about exploring and telling the compelling stories or briefs of lawyers who have experienced significant challenges and successes in the business of law. What was their gap? What were they missing? What is it that they wished that they had known? Well, it's our pleasure today to welcome Chris Waterman. Chris is a plaintiff-side employment attorney representing workers across the fine states of Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and he works with them on issues of discrimination, retaliation, wage and hour, and wrongful termination matters. After more than 2 decades in the legal field, Chris bit the bullet and launched his own firm, Waterman Law, in 2023 to bring his experience, his steady judgment, and his client-first approach into a practice that's built specifically to advocate for the employee. His work has earned him multiple local best of recognitions, reflecting both the quality of his advocacy and the trust that he's built within the community. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Dom. Thanks for having me.
So, Chris, let's go back in time a little bit and to the point where you decided to become an attorney. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. It's something I kind of fell into, I guess. I didn't, grow up in an 8th grade, say I want to grow up to be a lawyer. I'd always had an interest in history. I loved it in high school. I was a history major in college. And after college, I took a year where I worked in Hartford, just in a volunteer setting, working with kids coming from abused homes and working with, kids under stress. And I came back to Boston after that and really didn't know what I wanted to do and was looking, frankly, for any job that, was a real job, not landscaping like I did in the summers. And so a bunch of my friends from high school were working at a firm that one of his friends' father, he was the managing partner. It was called, at the time, Campbell and Associates. They're a products liability law firm in Charlestown. They've gone through many different names since, 1993 is when I started with them. And, but I said, you know what, it's a job, and they were hiring, and I'm like, great. And it was fun. Great group of people. It was very young associates, attorneys, very young paralegal group. And I had a real enjoyable 2 years with them. And in my second year, started thinking, okay, this is not a job I want to have as a career. As a paralegal, but I thought that why not be a lawyer? And I started looking into that. I thought the other attorneys that I had met enjoyed it. And so I started poking around. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was at Suffolk Law at the time. And so I kind of knew what she was going through. And she had, some ups and downs there, but she enjoyed it overall. And so I said, okay, let's give that a shot. And so I applied to schools in the Boston area and ended up going to Suffolk starting in 1995. And from there, it's been a fun ride.
So, many of our listeners and viewers are attorneys, so they'll understand this next question. But I think the average person doesn't realize that you don't necessarily go to law school for a specific discipline. You get out of law school and you tend to either like or gravitate or see strength in a certain area. What was it that directed you to your specialty in the law?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. To your point, I went to law school just hoping to make it through first year. I'd heard so many nightmare stories and whatnot. And that's what I did. I just did the courses. First year, as you know, or may know, you don't really have a choice. You take the courses that are provided to you, the basic torts contracts. Second year, you're able to branch out and you have some more autonomy on the courses that you can take. And one of the courses that I took was mass employment law. I forget the professor's name off the top of my head. And then that summer, I had the privilege working at a law firm, Choate, Hall & Stewart, which is a nice firm here in Boston. and you were able to pick what groups you wanted to kind of check out. And so, you know, it was litigation and then employment law. And I worked with some fantastic lawyers there, you know, Greg Keating and Tom Shirley, who are, you know, great attorneys now. And I had a real enjoyable summer. I enjoyed the subject matter. And most importantly, it was just that. The subject matter in employment law is diverse. It's interesting. Every case is different. And there's some, you know, unlike a breach of contract case, an employment case, there's real people involved and there's some interesting stories. And I thought that, you know, let's give this a try. And over the years, I really grew an affinity for it. And it stuck. My first 4 years, actually, I was focused solely on employment law. I continued to work at, when I moved to a smaller firm in 2002, I believe, Demio LLP, I was able to grow a employment practice from ground up, and from there continued that. Just really enjoy the work, enjoy the people, and enjoy really making a difference on a grassroots level rather than working with big corporations. Which is nothing wrong with that. I've done that, but this seemed to speak to me.
Terrific. So one of the interesting things there was that you said you loved your work, which is very important, right? So you're lucky you're in a practice area that you really enjoy working in. So I'm curious, I think it was 2023, we said you took the plunge, right?
Yes.
Left the big firm and your career of having worked at larger firms and hung your own shingle. So Chris, what were some of the key challenges that you faced as you just started and you're 3 years in? What were some of the key challenges you faced?
Yeah, and I was lucky, Dom, because you know, if you talk to anyone who's hanging their own shingle, they might say that one of the key challenges is getting business. You know, I mean, if you don't have business, you're not going to have a practice. And I had spent the last 10 years really building my own practice, my own client base, and then the last 2 years, it was even more so, where I was kind of working at a firm but handling all the employment cases. And in fact, all the employment cases were my cases.
Yeah.
So when I was able to transition and hang my own shingle, it wasn't like I had to go pounding the pavement and looking for new cases and new clients. I already had a great stable of cases and clients. And then, as you both know, being members of Provisors, it was a great resource for me for clients and cases. And I had established a nice reputation in the community, especially on the North Shore, is that if folks were looking for employee side representation, they would give me a call. And so that part was probably the easiest. And the most challenging was going from an attorney who just worried about doing his work and billing. And now all of a sudden I'm dealing with all the infrastructure, getting the professional liability, getting the computer system, the software, making sure clients are paying. So much more administrative. So it really widens your roles and duties, and it stretches you a little bit thin. So over the past 3 years, as I've learned to streamline that, I can divert or focus most of my time on what I should be doing, which is working for clients and bringing in new casework.
Yeah, so that's great. So unlike many clients, the business development wasn't the killer for you. You had a pretty good staple. It's like an elastic band. You get stretched. There's all these other duties that you have to do, including, you know, chief bottle washer. So that was kind of that was new to you.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you've been able to figure it out.
The software out there is just amazing. I don't know. I couldn't imagine doing this 30, 20 years ago. That it's all in one. It's an all-in-one suite. It does 90% of what I need to do from a revenue billing side.
Yeah.
And so that's fantastic, and makes my job a lot easier, and I can focus on the more important things.
That's terrific. So not only did you not have the business development challenge the way that many others do, but you've also embraced technology, and it's worked for you, which is a terrific message for people listening today.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So just thinking back, I know you've been extremely successful as somebody who's just in their third year of practice. you've had a great start, but there's always things, right, that when we think back on, maybe we might have done better, maybe we would have approached differently. So I guess my question for you is kind of knowing what you now know, what would you have done differently?
That's an easy question. I would have done it much sooner. I would say the last 10 years at being at the firm, at being a partner at a firm, I'd always toyed with the idea of going out on my own. And at the time, I had 3 kids, hadn't gone to college yet, and having a consistent paycheck was important to me and my wife, for obvious reasons. And so going out on my own, there was risk involved in that. But as time wore on, I would always say, well, because you get nervous about it, as Bob pointed out earlier, it's a very transactional business and cases come and go. It's not like many lines of business like a financial advisor. They're going to be with you for, hopefully for their life. Here it's a case, someone comes with a case a year later, 2 years later, it's gone. So you need to replace that with other casework. And so I would have a fantastic year and I would say, why don't I go out on my own? It's like, well, these cases are ending. What if another case doesn't come in? And what's happened is that every year cases kept coming in. And I said, after COVID came, that kind of, I think put a hiccup in everyone's business life. And then, in a couple of years leading up to 2023, I started really saying to myself, okay, let's do this. And to be quite honest, it was and I don't mean to have this be an advertisement for provisors, but the business network and generation I had from the provisor really gave me that support and comfort to do that, as well as I had a nice stable of some corporate clients who had stayed with me over the years that they're able to, through their revenue, I knew I had a base level to at least keep the lights on. So I wish I had done it sooner, but I'm happy I did it now. And hopefully I'll do it for, a long time.
Yeah. So for those listening out there, Chris is thinking, like most people, especially lawyers, there's always fear about venturing out. What if this happens and what if that happens and etc. So he wished he'd done it 10 years ago. And, there's always a reason that we always hold ourselves back, with the, thinking through, well, what could go wrong with this? Because as lawyers, that's what you're trained to do. But listen to Chris. He did the circling pattern for 10 years until he eventually did it, and it's worked. It's worked out well. And it sounds also like networking has helped you kind of weather not the storm, but kind of feel confident enough that, hey, I can do this. I've enough of a base now to push forward with this, and you've been able to do it successfully.
Yeah, for sure.
It's awesome. Great.
So Chris, you've been an attorney for many years. You've now built a business, and that's been running well for years. You have a great reputation, and you love the work that you do. So like anything, at some point, there's going to be the other side of that. There's going to be retirement or exit. How do you want to be remembered as an attorney? How do you want people to think about you and the work you've done when you're no longer in the business?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Bob. I look at that from 2 angles. One is from the legal field, colleagues, other lawyers, and from there, from that angle, I'd like to be, the legacy, if you want to call it that, as someone who was a zealous advocate, but professional and ethical at all times, and someone who, you could work well with. I mean, obviously, adversarial environment, and having done this now for 28 some odd years, I've come to learn, and I learned it early on, that doesn't mean you need to be a jerk to the other side or difficult. And so that, I'd like someone to say, you know what, he's a great attorney. He's difficult, to work as an advocate. He's a great attorney, but he's not difficult to work with. So that's from the lawyer side, that piece. And as from like the individuals and clients, I'd like them to think, remember me as someone who worked hard for them, listened to them. I mean, I find myself sometimes serving as a therapist because they're going through a traumatic time in their life. And I'm there to hopefully address some of the financial impact of that, but at the same time, there's an emotional impact. And so those kind of weave together. And so hopefully I can make that, this traumatic situation a little bit smoother, a little bit less traumatic. And at the end of the day, secure them a result that is going to help them transition to hopefully the next phase of their life. And hopefully, people will look back and say, he worked hard for me. He got me everything that I had hoped for, and I'm thrilled with the result. Doesn't always happen, but that's what I strive for.
I like how you mentioned that you're a client advocate, but you're also addressing the fact that there's a lot of emotion around being in a conflict with an employer, or even having to choose to leave an employer, or having been terminated. Drama, trauma. I don't know whether there's a third thing that I can drama, trauma, and whatever. But for those out there, I think there are often people, especially it can be a strange time right now as far as companies downsizing or wanting to transfer people. Maybe there are people out there that want to get in touch with you and maybe just sit down for a consult. What would be the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, I'm always, and I tell this to anyone that I encounter, if you know someone who is in a situation, either they've been let go or they're having an issue in the workplace, have them give me a call. I speak to clients initially for a short period of time at no fee. And if I can work with them and help them, and maybe it leads to them, working with me going forward, or sometimes I have to give them the news that, unfortunately, I'm not sure you have a case here. That's hard for them to hear, but more often than not, I get from them that, I appreciate your honesty because, again, it's an emotional situation and they might be blinded by that emotion and look more, I always find myself saying a lot to clients, it just because it's unfair doesn't mean it's unlawful. And so that's something that, you have to pass along as well. But, they can find me anywhere, that social media, obviously my website, which is watermanemploymentlawgroup.com. I apologize for it being so long. I have a long last name, and employment law is a long word. And also on LinkedIn and other social media sites. But I'm always happy to talk to folks. And one thing I would always want to remind, when I meet with people about what I do and whatnot, they often, and I'm always surprised when I find this, is that if you're in a situation where you're being terminated and you're provided a separation agreement, more often than not, folks will just say, okay, I just have to sign it, I guess. Or, and I don't want to be difficult, I'm just going to sign this. Or I don't want the company to think that I'm being difficult. That's a mistake. Vast majority of times, if they offer you a monetary severance, you can do better than the first offer. And companies expect you to have a lawyer look at it. They expect you to come back to them and push back on that. And there might be other terms in there. There might be post-employment restrictive covenants that will limit your ability to find a new job. And so even if you don't have a severance, even if you don't think you can do better in a severance, the small amount of money you would pay to identify and have that section removed can prevent you from being limited in your next job search. So that's a strong word of advice to folks who find themselves in that situation.
I think that's really informative, especially I think when people find themselves in that spot, they're thinking, do I have a case? Well, if I don't have a case, do I really want to proceed with legal action? And they don't always understand the cost and everything else. I think it's good that you're able to have a reasonable conversation with them at no cost to identify, and that you're not going to waste their time if there's no case there. You're not going to pursue something anyway because it doesn't help anyone. And I think that gets over a lot of objection to people looking into that. So I think that's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there you have it, folks. If you hear the word severance agreement, whether it's for yourself or somebody you know, reach out to Chris, have them check it out, have a professional look at it, and provide you with guidance. Chris, congratulations on all of your success with Waterman Law. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So you've been listening to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their triumphs and their trials. If you have an interesting story to tell about your own triumphs and trials of owning your own law firm, or perhaps you know someone else that does, just get in touch with us. I'm Dominic Grew.
And I'm Bob Furlong.
And until we meet again.